All right, coaches, thank you for taking the time to review this. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what we discussed at our meeting a couple weeks ago in regards to changing the criteria. The purpose of making this change was to increase the accuracy and fairness for the teams that are being considered for playoff contention, and also, even more so, to give the committee better tools with which to evaluate the teams that are being considered. So the way that we're looking at doing this is to refine the current criteria that we have, not just completely wipe them clean. Keep the intent of the current criteria, because the intent is to get the best field possible and to seed it fairly, and then also to add a scoring system at the end once we're comparing teams, so that we get a better idea of numerically how the teams stack up against each other. So what I'm going to do now is go over the old criteria and how it's going to change with this new structure. The old criteria included conference record and finish. Now, this is a little bit ambiguous. You would hear things in the meetings along the lines of, well, yes, we finished in second place in our conference, but our conference is stronger than your conference. In the North this past year, there were 40 references to strength of conference, and currently there is no criteria for strength of conference. So the proposed new criteria would be strength of conference / division for those who have a split conference, and finish within that conference. So the way that would be calculated is the strength of the conference would be determined by the Massey rating in order within that region. So a team within the toughest conference and division would earn a 1, and any team in the second rated conference would earn a 2, and so on. The second part of this criteria would be the finish within your conference, in the actual order of finish once the ties are broken based on what your conference's tiebreak system is. Then you would simply add those two numbers together. So to give you an example of this, here we have the team that was in the second rated conference within their region, either North or South, and they finished in first place within that conference. So for that criteria, that team would receive a score of 3. The next criteria that we used to have was non-conference record. What this was intended to do was judge a team's out-of-conference success and their difficulty within, in that we didn't want a bunch of teams going out and playing a bunch of cupcakes and come in with a 14-0 record and not having played anybody. So to take into account strength of schedule in the non-conference, the new criteria would include non-conference RPI, and this is a way that we could calculate this on our website using only our non-conference games in order to figure out how tough a team's preseason or pre-conference schedule was. And I know that there are a lot of concerns about the accuracy of our RPI, which is why the next one we'll talk about doing away with. But ideally, we would have liked to have gone with a Massey rating on this. However, Massey is unable to delineate conference games from non-conference games. Having had discussion with him, it would have been too difficult in order to do that. So I think going with a non-conference RPI should be fairly simple for us to calculate on our website. Which brings us to our next old criteria, which was comparing teams' RPI. A lot of coaches had a lot of issues with RPI, whether it actually measured what it was intended to measure, whether it was too easily influenced, whether it was an accurate measure. So instead of going with the old criteria of comparing RPI, we've proposed in this new change that the new criteria would be to compare teams' Massey rating. It is strongly believed by many that the Massey rating system is a lot stronger than the old RPI. It takes a lot more factors into account, and it just appears to be a lot stronger evaluation of a team's actual strength. Now this brings us to probably our most flawed old criteria of record versus non-league automatic qualifiers. Now, only conference champions are earning automatic qualification for the tournament. So back in the day, there used to be 3 from each conference, so this was intended to look at how teams had done against the top teams or playoff team potential. Now, in actual practice, under the current system of only 1 automatic qualifier per conference, this old criteria seemed a little bit archaic and out of date. So what we did was we just went ahead and eliminated that and changed it with a new criteria that we feel measured what the intent of the old criteria was. So what we've changed this criteria to in the new proposal is winning percentage versus teams that are over 63%. So how you did against teams that had an overall record of 17 and 10, actually above 17 and 10. 17 and 10 would give you 63%. So we're talking about teams that are at a winning percentage of over 63%. And this criteria would include wins against teams from out of state, as long as they had played 18 games in their schedule. The next criteria was actually a pretty strong criteria in its foundation, wins versus quality teams. So the only change that we've made to that is actually how we calculate quality teams. In the old system, you would get credit for beating a team that was 29 and 1, the same as you would get credit for a team that had a percentage of 18 and 15. So what we wanted to do was reward teams for essentially what we like to call super quality wins. So in order to do that, we came up with a scoring system. So if you beat a team that had a winning percentage of 80 to 100%, you would earn 3 points in this category. If you beat a team that had a winning percentage of 72 to 79.9%, so just under 80%, you would earn 2 points. This year, there were 9 teams that were in the 3-point category, and there were 6 teams that were in the 2-point category, and there were 19 teams that had a winning percentage of 63.1% up to 71.9%, and those you would earn 1 point for a victory against those teams. So again, the idea here is that you're rewarding teams for beating super quality teams and not just the same amount as a team that barely is considered a quality team. So an example of this is a team that has beaten CCSF, Cosumnes River, and De Anza. So that's 3 quality wins. But CCSF would be in the over 80% category, so the team would earn 3 points. Cosumnes River would be in the 2-point category, so the team would earn 2 points for that win, and De Anza would be in the over 63% category, and the team would earn 1 point for beating them. You would then total all of their wins, and they would get a score of 6 for that category. The next criteria that we used to have was compare results against like opponents. Now this came down when you're looking heads up team to team, and it was a logistical nightmare. So what we just went ahead and did with this one was just eliminated it as well. The next of the old criteria was wins versus 500 plus teams. Now this is a great criteria. It looks at a team's strength and the games that they've won against good teams, above 500 teams at least. And the only issue that we had with this criteria was that it did not include the teams that we had previously referenced as quality teams. It was only teams that were between 500 and 18 wins. So it did not count those teams that what used to be considered a quality team as 18 or more wins. So what we've done is keep this criteria the same, wins versus 500 teams, only now we're allowing it to include all teams with a 500 record or better. What we want to try to avoid with this criteria is a team, for example, Team A has 7 quality wins and 2 500 wins, and Team B has 0 quality wins but has 3 500 wins. Well, in the old system, the 500 win criteria would be won by the team that has 3. Whereas looking at it, Team A that had 7 quality wins plus 2 500 wins actually had 9 wins against teams that were 500 or better, but those quality win teams would not have been included in this. So we're trying to avoid that situation and reward the team by including quality wins or 63% or better teams in the overall score for this criteria. Another new criteria that we've added is win percentage versus all 500 plus teams. So we could argue till we were blue in the face whether a 5-7 record is better than a 4-1 record. But in this scenario, it gives us something that's more tangible. So the team with the higher winning percentage, the team that is 4-1 would win the win percentage category, whereas the team that was 5-7 would actually have won the overall wins versus teams that are over 500. So it just saves us time in the process and say that, okay, this one's a wash. A team that is 4-1 versus a team that is 5-7 is a wash in that one of the teams has a better record, but the other has more wins against quality teams and played a tougher schedule. So what we're doing is rewarding the team for playing a tougher schedule, but also rewarding a team for having success at 4-1 clip against 500 teams. The next criteria that we had from the old was bad losses. Now we wanted to keep the intent of this was essentially punishing teams for losing to really bad teams, and that number was 9 wins at the time. So what we wanted to do was twofold. We wanted to keep the intent of that rule, and we also wanted to keep with the consistency of using winning percentage as a measuring tool to help us understand the teams that they're playing. So what we do here is a team gets 1 point for losses versus teams that have a 25 to 33% winning percentage. So that would equate to an 8-16 record, which would be a bad loss in our original criteria. Teams that would be a super bad loss would be given 2 points for that category. And the idea here is in this category you do not want to accumulate points. So the best score would be a 0, obviously, for not having any bad losses. And teams would be punished accordingly for having a loss against a team with a 25 to 33% winning percentage, and even harsher for a team that was under 25% winning percentage. The next old criteria was head-to-head competition. Now this got into some sticky situations where Team A beat Team B, but Team B beat Team C, and Team C beat Team A. So it's kind of a round-robin situation there, and it's hard to determine who has a better record. So what we've decided to do here is calculate your head-to-head by the grouping that you're competing with. So let's say there are 5 teams for the last playoff spot. Then you would calculate the wins each team had amongst those 5 teams for the score on this criteria. So those are the new criteria. What I'd like to do now is go over your criteria sheet and how you would fill it out so that you can get it back to your representative for the meeting. The scoring sheet is pretty straightforward. You would list your name, your conference name, your overall record, and your conference record. So to use as an example, this hypothetical team here, hypothetical community college, conference Big Six, and so on and so forth. The next part is filling out your actual criteria. So your conference strength and finish is the first one. Let's say you were a team that was in the second rated conference and you finished in first place. Your score by that criteria would be 3. Then you would move on down to the next criteria, which is non-conference RPI and rank within your region. So let's say your non-conference RPI was a .601, and that puts you at the 3rd best non-conference RPI within that region. Next, you have your Massey rating of a .16. If you look at the Massey ratings, this is a pretty typical score for a team that would be rated 4th in their region. Now, the reason we want to include this is so that we don't just look at an absolute score in case from rank 4 to rank 5 is an enormous discrepancy, that the reps can look at that as well. Next, you would see record and win percentage versus teams over 63%. So you would include in this your record of 8-2 as well as your winning percentage, followed by the wins in the rank system of 3 points for a super quality win and 2 and 1 and so on. You would put your total for that criteria on that line. Here's an example of a team that would have a total point system of 20 for their quality win category. They would get 3 points for a win against CCSF, 3 for Chaffee. They beat Chaffee twice. They would get that both times, 3 points. 1 point for a win over Cabrillo, 2 points for Cosumnes. LA Harbor would be 2. Those teams would go on in the same format. And then they would add those numbers all together, and you'd get a total of 20 points for that criteria. And that is the number that you would put on that line. You would follow that with your record and winning percentage versus all 500 teams, followed by the total number of wins versus 500 plus teams. The asterisk you see here is say that they're including a team that is out of state in their record. The next criteria is bad losses, of which this team, hypothetical team, has 0. Note that the head-to-head competition will be completed by the committee because you don't know which grouping you'll be competing and comparing with. So at that point, you're pretty much done. You turn that into your rep, and they bring it to the committee meeting, and the process is as follows. I'll go through a brief outline of how this goes, more so for the reps, but so that you get a little understanding of what's going on in these meetings and how intricate they can be. So to make sure that we maintain transparency and everything, I'm suggesting that we submit the name of the reps and the alternates by October 15th to the president or vice president, so that we can make sure that we know who's going to be there and nobody feels like somebody's trying to change it at the last minute. Next, coaches in your conference need to submit their forms to you. During the process, on the day of the meeting, the chair and the committee will review all the forms to make sure that everything is accurate as written and make changes accordingly. Also, at that point, the chair will review the process so that everybody's familiar with the process, because we have a turnover rate for the reps, and it changes year to year. At this point, each rep will submit the order of finish and the rank order of their conference. Again, I rewrote this just so there's a little less ambiguity to it. I wrote it by actually copying and pasting what the women had wrote. It seems to work for them. Not that we want to do everything that the women do. Next, a couple additions that we had talked about. Teams cannot be admitted before a team that finished ahead of them in their conference, which is actually was already in there. But we've added, since the last meeting, was once the field is selected, teams can be seated higher than a team that finished ahead of them in the conference. So that allows us to more accurately seed the field once the field has been selected. And this is the original process. The committee will decide on the field. Coaches will then nominate teams for groups 1 through 4, 5 through 8, and so on. And then coaches will discuss the merit of the teams being nominated from their conference. This is no change. It's just that the North hadn't been doing this in the right way at times, so we want to make sure that reiterating that we're going to follow the process as delineated in the supplement. So now comes the scoring part. The committee will rank the teams within each of the 9 criteria within the grouping that has been selected. Teams behind a tie will be 1 rank behind the teams within the tie. For example, if 3 teams are tied for second with 12 wins against teams that are over 500, all will receive a 2 rank for that second place finish. The next team or group of teams, there happen to be 3, will receive the rank of 3 within that criteria. So, in other words, it won't punish a team for finishing 1 win behind another team. It won't punish them 4 ranking spots in that criteria. So here's an example using the 6 teams that were nominated in the North for the top 4 spots. San Francisco was the number 1 team in the number 1 conference, so they got a 2 score. Fresno was in the 4th rated conference, and they were the first place team, so they got a 5 for that criteria. Santa Rosa was in the 2nd rated conference and was the first place team, so they earned a 3. Whereas Chabot was in the number 1 rated conference. They finished 2nd by way of their tiebreaker with Ohlone, so they also get a 3. Ohlone was in the number 1 rated conference, and they finished 3rd, so they earned a 4. And Yuba was in the 3rd rated conference, and they finished in 1st place, so they earned a 4. Then what we would put is the rank order of that. So CCSF would get a number 1 rank. Santa Rosa and Chabot would each get a 2. Ohlone and Yuba would each get a 3. And Fresno would receive a 4. That's the number that you see in the parentheses, and that's the only number that we would be concerned with moving forward. So the next 2 categories are non-conference RPI. We would rank them 1 through 6 in that as well. And then the Massey rating, we would rank them 1 through 6 in that category also. Then we have win percentage. We would write in the win percentage, and as you can see, 90% would be number 1, and so on, and then quality wins. We would rank the only number, again, that we'd be concerned with is the number that is in the parentheses. Let's see, so there's the filling out the rest of the bracket. We would rank each team in the parentheses in each of the categories, one being the best score and the highest number being the worst score. So what you would then want to do is add all of the rankings of each team into a sum total. So as you can see, CCSF in the parentheses had a 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. So that is a total of 10. Fresno, you would add up all the numbers in their parentheses as well, each of their ranks. They would get a 20. Those would clearly be the top two seeds. Santa Rosa and Chabot would come out tied with 27. Ohlone would have a 32, and Yuba their sum total would be a 34. Now, this process will take a little bit of time, but I would contest that it would take less time than all the arguing and the debating that usually happens in these meetings. Now, once we have these totals, the committee will be having a written ballot, and the votes will be displayed on the board. This process won't change at all. We'll just be able to use the sum totals to recognize and paint a better picture of what we're looking at within the teams. At this point, the displayed votes would be tallied, and we would see who had the best score, and if there happened to be a tie, the tie-breaking process would be a little bit different now. The first thing we would do is vote again, considering only the two teams or the multiple teams that are within the tie. We would compare the tied teams head-to-head. We would then seed them, the team with the highest sum total, which was the previous edition that we just did. Then we would seed the team with the higher quality win total, seed the team with the higher Massey rating, and then we would administer a coin toss. Now, I would contend that there's no way that this gets past number 5 into a coin toss because the ratings are very small fractions and numbers there. So this would be the new tie-breaking process, and I think it would work quite well. So then we would do this same process for seeds 5 through 8. The two remaining teams in this situation would be carried forward into that grouping, and we would continue to do it the same exact way for 9 through 12, and so on and so forth, until we had the entire field seeded. Thank you for taking the time to review this. I tried to make it as concise as possible, yet still including all the details that were necessary. If you have any questions about it, please contact me. There's my cell phone number there, my email as well. Again, this process is it seems to be a lot better process than the previous process. It is by no means perfect. Otherwise, the NCAA would be using something along these lines. And people that are a lot smarter than I have tried and failed to make a better process. But I believe this is an improvement on the process that we have. Again, thank you for your consideration of this and reviewing it.